Welcome to episode 70 of the Lead Out Loud podcast. It's really exciting that we've got 70 episodes behind us. I am Professor G. I am the creator and host of the podcast. And today we're going to start a little bit differently because we might have some new podcast listeners, new podcast viewers. And so I'm going to take just a few moments to give you a quick background of what the podcast is and what it has become. And then I will also take a moment to do an introduction and a little bit of a background on today's guest hosts, because we don't do that in the episode. We get right into talking about Gettysburg, and I'm going to get out of the way and let you hear that conversation here in just a moment. It's a great show. But first of all, the Lead Out Loud podcast, that's what this is, started off as a podcast about discussing change in organizations. And it kind of has morphed into now talking about leadership. And lately, the last 9 episodes, including this one, have been about looking at leadership through the lens of a particular film or TV show. So this is the Real Leadership Edition, REEL, a little play on words there. And what I do each week or every other week, the cadence shifts a little bit, is I have a rotating group of, they're not even guests, they're really guest hosts, because we just kind of get together and we talk about our perspectives on the movie in question. And so what my guests have in common is, well, number one, I know them all. And number two, they've all got some kind of experience in industry with leadership, either good or bad. And in fact, our guest host today, I actually met on my first podcast, which was inside the Boeing company. It was a podcast called The Movement Maker Show. If you're watching on the video, there's a sticker of it here over my right shoulder. And our guest, Dennis O'Donohue, he was the vice president of Boeing Defense, Space and Security when I interviewed him. His background, though, I'll get into his background here in a minute. But that was kind of the original flavor or sense of this podcast, is we would talk to people inside the Boeing company that were making things happen. And a lot of times they were not executives. They were folks at the working level, as we would say. But in this case, we had an opportunity to interview Dennis. And it was a great opportunity because Dennis was one of the best leaders that I encountered at the Boeing company, and really one of the best examples of a great leader that I've encountered in my career. I've worked in aerospace, large aerospace companies for almost 2 decades before going into my own consulting and entrepreneurship journey. And so I collected a lot of examples of leadership, and unfortunately, many of them were bad. But Dennis is one of the few that shines through as a great example of leadership. Dennis spent some time in the military. He began his career as a as a fighter pilot in the Marine Corps, and you're going to hear what his call sign was here when we get into the episode. And then he became a test pilot, first, I believe, for NASA, and then for the Boeing company. And he's just a really interesting guy, obviously a student of leadership. He's a student of history, and you're going to hear that come through in the episode as well. And we're super excited. I'm super excited and thankful that Dennis was able to make some time and come on the show with us. Maybe we'll see him again in the future. I also have on the show with me today Kev-Innovation. And so folks that have seen previous episodes, or listened to previous episodes, you've seen Kevin before. Kevin also worked at the Boeing company. That's where I know him from. And he, like me, has gone on a path from large corporate enterprise to entrepreneur and solopreneur really now. And we both do some teaching as well, which is a great opportunity for us to continue to just ruminate on some of these leadership topics and innovation topics, and then share them with others. So Dennis and Kevin are with me today for the episode. This movie's a little bit different in that it's really the first war movie we've covered. So you're going to hear us talk about Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. He is played by Jeff Daniels. We also discussed General John Buford, played by Sam Elliott. General George Meade, I believe, is mentioned, and he is played by Richard Anderson. And then Sergeant Buster Kilrain, I think we mentioned him as well, played by Kevin Conway. And that's on the Union side of the battle. And then for the Confederacy, General Robert E. Lee is played by Martin Sheen. General James Longstreet is played by Tom Berenger. And I think we have a mention to General George Pickett, played by Stephen Lang. Some of you may not know who some of those folks are, but those of you that do, and if you haven't seen the movie in a while or ever, at least now you can kind of picture who we're talking about as we go through this. So with that, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening and watching. As always, you can head over to lolpodcast.net for additional episodes of the podcast, as well as links to the podcast on all the major streaming platforms. Please, if you enjoy it, hit that like and subscribe button. Tell a friend. We would love to have their listenership as well. So without further ado, let's get into this episode of the Real Leadership edition of the Lead Out Loud podcast and our discussion of Gettysburg. Welcome to the Lead Out Loud podcast. I am Professor G. This is another episode of the Real, R-E-E-L, Leadership Edition. And today I am joined by Kev-Innovation. And Dennis, I did forget to tell you, do you have a clever nickname? Because, Kevin can't just be Kevin. He's got to be Kev-Innovation. I can't just be Sean. I have to be Professor G. We can just call you Dennis. You can be just Dennis.
Well, when I was a fighter pilot, my call sign was Irish.
Perfect.
Nice.
And so we're joined by Kev-Innovation and Irish.
Pretty fitting for the movie, too.
And there are some. The movie, which is Gettysburg, that's what we're talking about today. This was a pick by Irish. It is definitely the longest movie we've taken a look at so far, clocking in at a little over 4 hours, as I recall.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and read, as I do, the AI-generated summary of the film. And then heads up, Dennis, I'm coming to you to see where they missed something or what you'd like to add, or what you might disagree with. Sometimes ChatGPT takes some liberties. So for those that are not aware or who have not seen the film, or it's been a minute, Gettysburg is a sweeping 4-hour retelling of the pivotal 1863 battle that turned the tide of the American Civil War. The film focuses on 3 key days of the conflict, exploring both Union and Confederate perspectives through the eyes of high-ranking officers. While the military tactics and topography are front and center, the true heart of the film lies in the moral and emotional strain of leadership during wartime. Viewers witness the clash between Lee's unwavering belief in his men, Longstreet's cautious pragmatism, and Chamberlain's determined stand for the Union cause at Little Round Top. I will share some noteworthy facts in a moment, but what do you think? Did they get it right? What would you add?
No, I think that was a really good summary. So hats off to ChatGPT. Nice job.
Okay, ChatGPT can keep its job for one more day. This was filmed on location at the actual Gettysburg battlefield with the cooperation of the National Park Service. They utilized thousands of Civil War reenactors for battle scenes. And I'm curious if either of you know this. It was originally intended as a TV miniseries for TNT, and it was released theatrically due to its scale and scope. I guess they thought that TNT wasn't big enough to handle Gettysburg.
No, I did not know that.
Known for its commitment to historical accuracy in uniform strategy and character depiction. I have to say, though, I had such a hard time, especially earlier in the film, and with all kind of Civil War shows, it's keeping the uniforms, keeping track of who's who. They all just look like they're wearing really hot, uncomfortable uniforms to me. And the color differences are very distinct. And I'm sure there are probably some aspects of the uniforms that you can look at to go, oh yeah, that's Union, that's Confederate. But boy, in the beginning, I had trouble. I had to keep checking my notes to go, okay, wait, I know who the actor is. Let me go see who he's playing. Which side are we talking about here? So let's start by jumping straight into the character that Dennis brought up when he suggested the movie, Joshua Chamberlain. And actually, Dennis, I'm going to ask you. I know you've got a favorite scene, favorite leadership moment from the film. So we're not going to beat around the bush today. We're just going to go straight to it. Why do you like Chamberlain? What's your favorite leadership moment or moments?
Yeah, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain appeals to me for a couple of reasons. One, he was not a career military officer. He was a professor of letters or professor of philosophy at Bowdoin College in Maine, and decided that he had to do his share to help the Union cause. And he joined the Army against the protest of his family, by the way. And he ended up commanding the 20th Maine Regiment. And when the war was over, by the time the war was over, he had been promoted from colonel to major general, two-star general in the Union Army. And he probably could have stayed in the Army, but he chose to go back to his academic life. And it really is the epitome of what we call the citizen soldier. I served 12 years active duty in the Marine Corps. And when I got out to go to work for NASA as a civilian test pilot, I continued my military service in the Air Force Reserve. And that whole concept of citizen soldier is something that really resonates with me.
It is. I was fascinated by. This is the first time I've taken a deep look at really any of the Civil War characters beyond just what you'd learn about the Civil War in school. And when I realized he was not only not a career soldier, but a university professor, I was like, wow, okay, that's and he didn't just go in and he wasn't just a soldier either. He exhibits tremendous leadership, and as we were chatting the other day, Dennis maybe even contributed to a moment that changed history, or certainly the course of things. We'd be in a different situation today.
Well, that's exactly right. The actions that he took during the second day of the battle on Little Round Top in defending the left flank of the Union line, had that line broke, then the Confederate Army would have rolled up the left flank of the Union line and probably would have succeeded in pushing the Union off the hill. Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, low on ammunition, has withstood 3 charges by the Confederate Army. On the 4th charge, he orders a bayonet charge and a wheeling motion to roll up the assault by the Confederates, and finally drove them down off a Little Round Top. And that is probably the pivotal moment in not just the Battle of Gettysburg, but the entire Civil War. And as you all know, Gettysburg was just a terrible defeat for the Confederate Army. It was really the high watermark of the Confederacy. From that point on, it was really just a matter of time before the South would be brought back into the Union, and the Southern cause would ultimately fail. My favorite scene in the movie of Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, and I have used this clip from the movie over the years. It's the best example I know of what I call authentic leadership. And the scene is when Chamberlain is in his tent, and he's in command of the 20th Maine, and he's given custody of what's left of the survivors of the 2nd Maine Regiment, who had been through many a battle and had lost almost the entire unit, and had suffered from rather poor leadership on the part of senior Union generals, and had pretty much had enough and just wanted to go home. And they were being held as prisoners, and they were turned over to Colonel Chamberlain, and he was informed that he could execute them if he wanted to. And he asked to have all those men fed, and then gathered in one location, and he goes and he addresses them. And you have to really watch the scene to appreciate the authenticity of Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain in that moment. The first thing he does is he's honest. And he says, "I've been told I could shoot you if I want to." And he said, "Well, I'm not going to do that." And then he makes...
I don't think they knew that at first.
Right. Yeah.
They were very relieved to hear him say that.
Yeah. And then he does what all great leaders do. He connects with them. And how he connects with them is, he says, "We're the 20th Maine. We're Maine men, just like you." So he establishes that identity and that connection. And then he knows how to articulate the higher calling, the real purpose for why they're all there. And he talks about how in past wars that men fought for land, they fought for money, they fought for women, they fought for all kinds of things. But this was something much higher than any of that. And we were fighting for the freedom of other Americans who were held in bondage. And then he says, at the end of the day, we're all fighting for each other. And he says that's never happened before in human history. And it's a riveting moment in the film. It really is. And then he makes it personal. And this is something else that good leaders do. He gives them a choice. He said, we're going into battle, and you're coming with us, whether you want to or not. But if you choose to join us and pick up your arms and fight alongside us, nothing more will be said. If you choose not to, well, you're still coming with us, and we'll just have to deal with you afterwards. And the last thing he says is, "Gentlemen, if we lose this battle, we lose the war. So if you choose to join us, I will personally be forever grateful." He made it personal.
Yeah.
And again, this is what authentic leaders do. And he had a moment where he put himself out there and was vulnerable. And that's another great trait of leaders, authentic leaders, is they're not afraid to show that they're vulnerable, and they don't have all the answers, and they don't know everything.
Man, I got something I wrote down about that, but Kevin, I'll go to you. Was there something you wanted to jump in with?
No, I mean, that was exactly the scene that, so I hadn't watched the movie since I was maybe junior high school. We had to watch it for history class. I was, every Memorial Day in my small little town, we would do a reading of the Gettysburg Address, and the year that I was eligible for it, I got that honor, and so I got to read the Gettysburg Address. So I've always had this deep connection to Gettysburg and how powerful those few days turned out to be.
Yeah.
But I haven't gone back and seen this movie in, I don't know, what does that make it, 30 years? I mean, it's been a long time. And yeah, I certainly had a different appreciation watching it at this stage in my life than when I was a teenager. I appreciated it then, but I mean, it really hit me in a different way. And that scene that you were describing, Dennis, is was probably the most powerful one of the most powerful ones for me in the movie. And I think there was another aspect of it that, if I'm remembering it correctly, where, you know, physical presence, he also comes down to their level when he's talking with them. He's not towering
Yeah.
over them like, hey,
Right.
I'm the, and the same way, that same physical kind of attribute of him not refusing to ride on the horse all the time and
Yeah.
walking with
Right.
the, right? And
Yeah.
I love that, you know, all the dimensions of leadership that he exhibits, including how he physically represents himself to his troops. And then
Yeah.
one
And
other,
there's a,
sorry, I
oh,
was
that's
gonna say
okay. Go for it.
one other subtlety is he's talking, and I don't think it's that exact scene, but he starts to say, my men, and then he says like our troops. Like he even catches himself, or my regiment. I forget exactly what the wording was, but like he even catches himself to make sure that how he's conveying himself is as this part of the team, not someone above the team.
Exactly. Yeah. He's in it with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's another scene in the movie with him that I think is very poignant, given the very deep divides we have in this country today. And that scene is him and, if you remember, the master sergeant, um, Irish master sergeant,
Oh
and
yeah.
uh, Sergeant Kilrain. And Kilrain is asking him, well, what led to all this? And and didn't you ever like talk about it? This issue of slavery between North and South. And Chamberlain says we would get visitors from the South to Bowdoin College, on an occasional basis, and we just at first didn't consider it to be polite to bring it up. And he said, so we didn't talk about it until we couldn't talk about it.
Mm.
And it's very true. It was one of the reasons for the Civil War, is just that failure to really talk and try and reach some sort of mutual understanding of where everybody's coming from. Yeah, we didn't talk about it until we couldn't talk about
Isn't there a famous quote? What we've got here is a failure to communicate.
Yes.
Isn't that from a Civil War movie?
I,
it.
it,
What was the quote?
What we've got here is a failure to communicate, and
Yeah, I think that might have come from from the Civil War. Yeah.
I know it was on a Guns N' Roses song in the '90s, but that was not the origin.
it was Cool Hand Luke.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
I had help from the internets on that one.
Yeah, thanks.
I know I've seen it before. Like I was blanking on what movie it was. Okay, so you guys both covered a lot of ground there. The point you made, Dennis, about bringing the comparison to what we have in the country today. Yeah, we didn't want to talk about it, and today it's the same thing, but I think maybe the reasons are the same. I don't even know. You're afraid to talk about certain things because, well, social media is going to kill you, or people are going to come after you. It's going to get taken out of context or whatever. And I'm sure there was a 19th century equivalent to that occurring in the 1800s, where maybe it was just a matter of being too polite to talk about it, and now we've evolved all the way to, well, I don't want to talk about it because people will disagree with me on social media, and I just can't handle that. I can't handle the truth. There's another quote, Kevin.
But I think to your point, Sean, today though, I think people are even emboldened because you can be kind of anonymous and raise your point of view without full attribution, personal.
That's I think that's different though, and that's a part of a different problem, because if I'm anonymous, I can just lob things out and say whatever whether I'm being coherent or not. I can just be angry, essentially.
Yeah.
The nice thing about, identification, knowing who's saying what, and having things track back to people is, I think that tempers a little bit what they say. It also lends credibility to it, because if there's just, somebody, this happened the other day on the high school here that my kids go to was vandalized. It was a senior prank. And by most accounts, though, it went beyond a prank. I mean, there was actual physical damage caused to the school. And so somebody had posted a picture and said, here's what happened. And then you've got, of course, now the 500 comments from the people that have to weigh in. And I'm reading through, and the most ridiculous and the most vicious comments are the ones that say anonymous user.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so, that's not, that's almost as bad as, well, we didn't talk about it until we had to talk about it, or couldn't not talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's cyber courage. A lot of people have
Right.
a lot of courage when they can be anonymous. Right.
You used the word, I think you both used the word authentic several times, and that is definitely something that bubbled to the top for me as I was watching Chamberlain. And Lee as well. We'll get to Lee in a second. I found both men to be extremely authentic. They had strong convictions, and they were acting upon them. What I really like, though, another example going back to Chamberlain, what I really like is he's really good at conveying intent and getting people to understand, hey, this is why we're going to do what we do. And where I saw that the most was as they were preparing to hold, I keep wanting to say Little Big Town, but that's the band, Little Round Top. He's been told, look, you're the end of the line. You guys got to hold this. And then he goes to his men and he's like, look, you're the end of the line. And then he explains it in even greater detail. Look over there. There's nothing over there. If they come around here, they're going to flank us. Like, this is it. We've got to hold this, which I thought was great, because he didn't just tell everybody, hey, you go stand there, you go stand there, you go stand there, or else they're not going to know why they're standing there. They're going to have to come back to him and go, okay, well, they're shooting at me. What do I do now? And of course, that's not the case. They're, highly capable people. So, hey, here's what we're trying to do. And then he let them do it until he had to make that executive decision, which I feel that was the, I think that was, again, the 19th century version of too close for missiles switching to guns. Like, attached bayonets, we're going in. Anyway, I thought that was, I love that about him.
Yeah. That's a great example of clearly articulating commander's intent. Right. So when the soldiers understand what the intent of the situation is, then they're and given the freedom to maneuver. Right. So there's that idea of pushing down decision making to the lowest level, and then clearly setting the boundaries for when the situation gets beyond the boundaries to elevate to a higher command for a resolution. And he allows his men, that freedom within clearly defined boundaries for how to act. But commander's intent, it's something I learned in the Marine Corps. And, it's vitally important that your troops understand your intent as the leader.
I think, servant leadership is also exhibited, the fact that he's making sure they're well fed, they get some food in them, they haven't been treated, and he's at their service to help get them up, right? And it seems it's in his best interest to make sure that they're healthy, because whether they choose to fight or not, if they're lagging behind, that presents a problem for him and everybody else, right?
Yeah, and that's a great example of leading from your head through your heart to your hands, right? And it's a great example of empathetic leadership.
Yeah.
I think, Kevin, you mentioned it as well. the times where he's not going to ride on the horse and he's walking with them. Another very powerful image of that idea of some servant leadership. Hey, I'm here with you. I'm not high on the horse. I mean, quite literally. And the other thing I was struck by too is, and obviously this is a real story. These things really happened. So I'm not saying it was just the movie that portrayed this, but it occurred to me that as they're having these conversations and trying to figure out what to do, nobody knew what to do. They weren't sure what the right path was, over and over and over again, but they just figured it out. Like, okay, let me take in the information. Great. Now this courier just came in with some new information. Well, that sucks. Okay. Well, let's go do this. And I like that Hollywood didn't try to make that something different than it was, and portray them as knowing, what the answer was going to be. Which is my way now of segueing to, let's talk about Lee. Because I see a lot of similarities between Lee and Chamberlain. Starting with the authenticity. I mean, he was authentic. He also, I think, did a pretty good job of conveying intent, although it's not illustrated quite to the level of detail that Chamberlain did. But what do you guys think about that? I mean, I'd like to compare and contrast Lee and Chamberlain. What is the same from a leadership perspective with them, and what's different?
Well, I would start with Lee was a career military officer and considered one of the finest officers in the United States Army up until the beginning of the Civil War, whereas, of course, Chamberlain was not. Chamberlain had no problem with really kind of sharing who he was and putting himself out there as vulnerable. Lee was much more reserved, and he held his cards pretty close to the chest. So there are some striking differences there. I wouldn't describe Lee as a servant leader. He very much was in command.
Yes.
And and one of the Lee's downfall at Gettysburg was he really believed that his troops were invincible. He didn't think they could lose. Because they had done nothing but win for the entire previous 2 years. And one of the other characters in the movie who I'm just really impressed with is Lieutenant General Longstreet, who they call Old Pete. And he was a brilliant defensive general. And he saw what was happening, and he had the foresight to know this was not going to go well for the Confederate Army, and he had the courage to speak truth to power. And Lee wasn't all that willing to hear it.
Yeah.
And it's tragic that in the end Lee took an extreme risk and just hoped for the best when he sent Pickett charging across that wheat field up onto Cemetery Ridge, and there was just no way that could be successful. But he felt like the battle had to be here; it had to be now. They couldn't live to fight another day.
He was a man of such great conviction that he did not allow reality to realign,
intervene.
He did not recalibrate to the realities in front of him.
Yeah.
His conviction was so strong it blinded him, I think.
It did.
And do you think, you just mentioned, they kept winning and winning and winning. He thought they were invincible. And he's really portrayed in the movie, and I think this is historically accurate as well. They revered him
Oh
almost
yeah.
to a point of worship. Do you think that played into it? I mean, was his head a little
Yes.
bit maybe too big?
A little hubris.
Well, there certainly was. A lot of people don't like to hear this, especially in the South, but there was an arrogance to Lee. And it wasn't just the arrogance on the battlefield and thinking he was just better than his enemies. I mean, there are some historical accounts where he is considered to be a bit arrogant. And I don't think he thought well of Union leadership or the talent of Union officers. And I think he got lulled into believing that, we've always won, so we're just always going to win.
And what's striking is even in the face of, like you said, Longstreet, right? Yeah, Longstreet.
Yeah.
Even with Longstreet saying, okay, this does not look like a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, he laid it out a little bit, more dramatically and in detail than that. But essentially, he's saying, look, we can't win this. And he's pointing to very specific tactical elements. So he's not just that operations manager that comes in and says, look, I've been doing this for 30 years. We're going to do it my way. He's like, no, we're going to have to go across here. We're going to be exposed. They're going to pick us off. We're not going to be able to get around. And Lee just won't. I mean, speaking of that ops guy that won't listen to anybody, right? That's Lee. That's what I saw when I saw that scene kind of unfold. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just like those cases in industry where you've got somebody who's so they're holding those convictions so strongly that they cannot and refuse to see the reality of the situation.
And it was just like a
Yeah.
few days before, like earlier in the movie, right? They have a similar conversation, and he's like, great, they're off. We pushed them back. They're scattering their lines. Our strategic objective here is done. Let's head back towards Washington and do what we were, what the intent, commander's intent above them, right? That was the intent. And I think that's where that hubris, you see a glimpse of it in that scene, and then, it fatally in the Pickett's charge.
Yeah, and Longstreet does an excellent job of clearly explaining to Lee the risk in this plan, and that risk being, if we're not successful, then the Union Army can put themselves between us and the Potomac River, and we'll never get back to Virginia. And it's only through the I don't know what else to call it, but the incompetence of Union leadership at the very highest levels that they didn't take that opportunity to put their army in between Lee and the Potomac River. Meade, it's not really covered in the movie itself, but Meade missed an unbelievable opportunity to end that war right there. And instead it went on for another 2 years.
Right.
So Lee, who was very intelligent, he hears this from Longstreet, but he still takes the risk, knowing his entire army could be destroyed.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask this question, and then I'll give some evidence, or I'll tell you why I'm thinking this. Is Longstreet a better leader than Lee?
Yes.
Because what I'm thinking of is you have Longstreet. You're right. He articulates it beautifully, and Lee won't have it. And then Longstreet goes back, and you can see it in his face. He does not want to give this order. He does not want to send them. In fact, I think he kind of delays it a little bit until finally he gets a message that says, look, what are you waiting for? You got to go. And he just does not want to send them, but he does. But I think where he's a little bit of a better leader is he had that connection to his men where he's looking at the situation going, okay, we've got a cause, sure, but we're not going to win, and I don't want to send them out to just go get slaughtered.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And he was he was a brilliant general. He really was. And doesn't get the credit that he really deserves. And the reason he doesn't get the credit is because after the war was over, he was very critical of the League. and Lee's decisions at Gettysburg. And of course, to the South, Lee was deified. He was God, and you didn't talk. You didn't cast a poor line on God. And so Longstreet was very much ostracized in the South because of it. And it's sad because he really was a brilliant general, especially when it came to defense.
The note I actually wrote to myself, pushes back respectfully and with data.
Yeah.
I like the fact that his spy, essentially his lookout, is the one, and then he's the one that went to Lee and said, "Hey, this is going down." So I would say, there's a little bit of maybe not unconventional, but he was willing to use data from all over to support what you're saying, Sean. Not just sit around and wait, right?
So I got a question about that. But any other thoughts before I pivot here on either Lee, Chamberlain, or Longstreet?
No, I just want to make sure
No,
we don't overlook Mr. Sam Elliott's character before we're done.
that's John
Yeah.
Buford. He's that's one of my other poignant moments in the film. Was the action he took on Seminary Ridge on the first day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, talk about having the foresight to know we have got to hold this, or it's going to go very badly for us.
And he
Can
lays
you
out,
paint
exactly like we're in a bad spot down here, and here's
paint the
why.
picture a little bit more, Kevin? Just so for people that haven't seen the movie in a
I'm
while,
sure
or
Dennis can paint it much better than I can with his military tactical background. But
Yeah, John Major General John Buford is commanding a cavalry regiment and cavalry corps. No, it's a regiment. Yeah, and he arrives. He's the first one to arrive at Gettysburg, and of course, cavalry are not equipped to take on heavy infantry, and they're really scouting more than anything else. But they arrive west of Gettysburg, up on Seminary Ridge, and they spot the first, the forward units of the Confederate Army, and they can see what's coming. and he realizes if they take this ridge line, then we're going to be in the same position we were in Fredericksburg, where we're just charging up a hill and being cut down, cut to pieces, and we can't let that happen to the Union Army again. So he clearly articulates to all his officers, just the perilous situation that the Union now finds themselves in, and it's up to them to hold that ridge until the advanced infantry divisions can come up to reinforce them.
right.
And he just did a brilliant job of one, seeing it, and then being able to articulate it and the importance of holding it. It kind of goes back to that commander's intent again. So and that cavalry division did a phenomenal job holding off those advanced units of the Confederate Army on that first day.
And I like also when he's up in the tower and he sees he needs to be down on the front line. He's not sending orders down. He's like, I'm going. Like he doesn't wait for anyone else. He's like, I'm down. I'm on it.
Yeah, throughout when you look at throughout the battle scenes, when you particularly Pickett's charge, the generals are right up there in front, carrying a sword. They're not even carrying a gun. I mean, they might carry a sidearm, but they're not carrying a rifle. They're carrying a sword, and they're leading their men. They're at the front. I mean, talk about courage.
Yeah.
Well, okay, first, let me just correct something. It was actually Sam Elliott's mustache playing that role, wearing a Sam Elliott costume. So this is one of the other things I wrote down. I've got two kind of overarching thoughts that I wanted to touch on. And the first is, how did I write it? I think I said, thank God our fighting tactics got better over the years. I mean, for heaven's sake, like, we're just going to stand in a line still. At least they're not wearing red coats, so we've advanced a little bit. But we're just going to stand in a line and we're going to march through an open field and let them mow us down. And then you've got all your high-ranking folks are just standing right there too. And in fact, we see some of them start getting picked off, which I think we talked about this last time, Kevin. I believe that was a military strategy. Hey, let's get rid of the officers so that they don't.
Right.
The troops won't know what to do next.
Right.
But I mean, why are we still fighting like that? And what, I don't know if anybody knows the answer to this, probably be Dennis. Like, when did we start shifting to being more strategic and sneaky in our war fighting?
Well, I think, Dennis will know better than I, but from what my understanding, my limited understanding, is the Revolutionary War actually, the British were approaching things from this very chess-like, hey, this is how you go. This is a very gentleman's kind of game almost. This war and battle, and then the Americans introduced new tactics, some of which they learned from Native Americans, I believe. But it was a different style to engage in war, and I don't think it immediately is lost by the time you get to the Civil War. But some of those tactics are more present in the Civil War. But the amount of lives that are lost, I don't, Dennis, maybe you take it from here or correct me if I'm wrong, but at some point even in World War I and II, we still see this very like, hold the line, we're digging trenches instead of, putting up rock barriers and
instead of putting up a tree branch.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so a very famous saying, the military is always fighting the last war. They'll always plan to fight the next war like they fought the last one, and and the learning goes on, during the course of the war, and that's when tactics shift and tactics change. It was interesting. A lot of foreign countries studied the American Civil War. They had never seen anything on this scale before, and it's crazy. As much as they studied it, they still used the same tactics in the Franco-Prussian War and in World War One. And in a lot of ways, the U.S. Army was like far advanced compared to our European allies in World War One, because we knew that wouldn't work. Now, we were kind of constrained by the situation, what it was when we got there in 1917. And we were put under the command of French and British commanders, but we knew when we showed up in France in 1917 that those kind of tactics no longer work. But the Europeans had to learn that for themselves.
I mean, I had a thought because I literally I'm just dumbfounded as I'm watching them just get mowed down. And I thought, okay, so to what extent is this a technology issue? And what I mean by that is when we started inventing better boats, like warships, when we started flying, certainly, did that then give us a taste for, wait a minute, we can inflict damage without actually having to be there? Maybe we shouldn't just go marching in a line straight towards the people who are shooting at us.
Well, there's always that that fallacy of a clean war, right? Where we don't have boots on the ground and we just do it with airstrikes, and we do it with other weapon systems that are standoff systems that allow us not to get our hands dirty. And here's the thing: in any war, you have to have boots on the ground. You have to, because when all that technology fails, what are you going to do? So.
But do you have to be lined up in a line?
No, not at all. No, that's changed dramatically.
Yeah.
But I mean, you even look at World War II, and you look at Germany and the whole concept of blitzkrieg. That was a radical departure from how World War One was fought. So believe the Germans learned. They learned very quickly, which was why they were so successful in moving west across Belgium and into France and occupying most of France during World War II, because they completely changed their tactics.
So along those lines, the other thought that I had watching this is communication. Does the leadership change at all if our communication technology is different? Because these guys are waiting for men on horseback to deliver either a memorized message or maybe something written down, but they're traveling at the speed of horseback. And that's really hard to imagine for us today when we just think of something and before we're even done thinking of it. I was talking to a friend of mine earlier. As I'm on the phone with her, she's like, "Oh, my robot is here delivering my lunch." It's like, you're still ordering the sandwich and the drone is already bringing it to you. So there's that instancy today. And I just thought, okay, how does any of this change? How are leadership strategies different, if at all, when you have real-time communication?
Yeah, if you go back to you go back to the turn of the 20th century and Teddy Roosevelt and the Great White Fleet that he sent around the world. The fleet commander. There was no satellite communications. There were no telephones. There's nothing. I mean, you were on your own, and you were thousands of miles away from home. So you were the one who were making the decisions, and ultimately would live with the consequences. And so I think in today's age of instant communication, it's a good news, bad news story. In those days, you really developed leaders because you were on your own. And after the conflict is over, you'd write a letter and mail it home and say, "Here's what happened." But today, it, it's a good news, bad news story. You're getting information in real time, but sometimes there's such a thing as too much information, and there's also such a thing as too much control at the top. And we see that time and again where, the battle's being directed from the White House instead of being fought, and directed, at the battlefield level. And that doesn't always work. In fact, we've got lots of examples where it really had some pretty adverse impacts on the outcome of a particular engagement. But that's where we're at. And, if you go back to Gettysburg and you go back to the Civil War, that was the first war where the president actually was getting telegrams from the front as to the progress, of the battle. And not every general thought that was a great idea.
Understandable.
Right? Yeah.
It takes away, it threatens some of their autonomy.
Yeah, it threatens their autonomy. And, there are stories where they cut the telegraph lines because they just don't want to hear from Lincoln.
Well, I mean, we saw that, Kevin, when we did Apollo 13. Kind of a version of that. The astronauts are trying to solve problems up in space, and they've got all the monitors on them for their vital signs. And the surgeon keeps telling them they got to rest. And then, Lovell just has had enough and rips his sensors off.
Right.
Jim, are you still alive? Yep. Okay. And they just say, give him some space. Let him have it.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Okay. So as we begin to wrap up here, if you could pull one, this is a little bit of This is different. I try to ask this question every time. It's different when it's fictional characters versus here we've got kind of some real life characters being played by fictional or being played by actors. But the question is, what if you could pull one person aside and give them some leadership advice, or I guess really any advice? Who would it be, and what would you say?
Well, so I'm conflicted on that one because I would pull Lee aside and give him some advice, but had I done that and that advice was taken to heart, would be living in a very different country right now. So
What did you say
yeah,
last
but
time, Kevin? You have a hard time giving advice to the villain.
It's
yeah, That's- yeah, and not that Lee's a villain, but I guess I would pull him aside and say, past success is no guarantee of future success. You have senior officers who are trying to talk to you about this, and you need to listen, and you need to really reflect on what it is they're trying to tell you.
Kev-Innovation.
I I would encourage Chamberlain to go talk to other officers and give him a little bit of the magic that he has, kind of his additional perspective of not being career military. I think really is helpful in him connecting with his men, and maybe there could have been different results in other parts of the battles later on if they had taken away that little gem of humanity with Chamberlain.
I'm inclined to probably want to pull Lee aside as well. So I guess if I had a second choice, I'm wondering, could Longstreet have rallied support from some of the other generals or some of the folks on his side? I'm just, maybe pull him aside and go, hey, let's find a different way to convey to Lee the gravity of this situation. Again, strictly from a leadership perspective, because I don't want him to win. But I mean, I think that was just such a heartbreaking scene. Again, to see the anguish on his face, and what do you do? His choices now are: does he commit mutiny and just
Right.
go rogue, or does he,
Yeah.
follow the orders that he's given? And I guess my go-to there is, well, maybe we can get some other people, and maybe there's a way to go convince him that I haven't seen yet.
That would have been tough to do in the heat of the moment.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to consider too that not all the general officers on either side were career military officers. A lot of them were politicians and with
Oh
no
yeah.
military experience who just said, "Yeah, I'd like to be a general in the Confederate Army." And so they're very political. They certainly weren't like interested in rocking the boat. Um, so you got that element that plays into it too. And then it's just Lee's success and the aura around Lee. I mean, this man has led us into some pretty perilous situations, and we've always won.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do think one additional thing. I don't know if we fully touched on it as far as Chamberlain goes, but like going back to the 120-ish people he inherits, if he doesn't get them on board, maybe they don't hold
Right.
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 And like that, seemingly small ability to connect with those guys and have most of them, nearly all of them, get on board. That that is even more of a finite reason
Mhm.
why things worked out the way they did, right? I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
just that tiny little thing. I mean, it's just fascinating. How many of those throughout humanity, throughout human history, right?
Right.
that we don't even fully appreciate the nuance of outcomes being what they are or what they could have been
Right.
every single day of our
Exactly.
lives.
Okay. Any other anybody we missed that somebody wanted to talk about? I mean, there's a lot. It was a 4-hour movie. It's not going to be a 4-hour podcast. So, but if there's any other highlights we wanted to hit, now would be the time. Looking at my own notes here. What if there's nothing else? I'm open to suggestions. What should we do next? Another question I always ask. I don't always do it.
I know. I'm keeping track of how many episodes go by before.
We haven't done a lot of. Maybe I'll ask the question in a different way. I think this is the first real military movie we've done. We did Tropic Thunder, but that doesn't count.
What? How dare you?
Yeah. What would be the next good military film?
I mean, I feel like it's very cliche, but Top Gun, I think, has some great lessons in it. I don't
Okay.
know if the pilot in the room has something else to think about.
We'll put it on the list. Did we lose Dennis?
I think he can't hear us, maybe?
Got it. Okay. Well, we will make sure that he knows what we said. Including, thank you, Dennis, for joining us. I'm going to see if I can get him back so I can say goodbye, but we're going to say goodbye to everybody here. So, Kev-Innovation, thank you, sir. And as always, you can go to lolpodcast.net to see all things podcast and sign up and subscribe and do all the things. So we'll catch you all next time.